Aloha alokea. Hawaii. My name is Mr. Roberts to some, and Grandmaster to some, and Sergeant to some. I'm also the founder of Roberts Karate, which was founded in the fall of 1964, and it's still going on at this time. And we have, just to bring that up to date, I'll just name you some places where our umbrella is still being taught. For instance, at Ohio we have David Hofstadler. Again, in Ohio we have Lee Hines. In Maryland we have Jim Roberts Jr. In Virginia we have Ron Jenkins. In Virginia we have Barry Brown. So all these black belts and all these instructors all come under the Roberts School of Karate umbrella. So this is an ongoing teaching that's been going on since 1964. Even though I had a break in 67, 68 while I went to Vietnam, it still kept going because I turned it over to one of my senior black belts to keep the school and name going until I got back from Vietnam. Now back to the beginning. David Hofstadler was about 6 years old when he started with my Roberts Karate at Fort Belvoir, right outside of Fort Belvoir. And we'll come back to that later. I was born in the district called Kalihi. It was kind of a rough district to grow up in. Born May 26, 1933. There were 4 of us brothers, and we were all born in the same house, and we were all born through midwives. In those days, nobody went to the hospital to give birth. We all gave birth. Most of the mothers gave birth at home. Everybody was pretty poor, so most of them used the midwives at that time. And when I was born, my name was James Kalewahano. So within about several weeks, I was adopted, or what the Hawaiians call Hanai, by the Roberts family, Henry and Mary Roberts. They were from the Waikani area of Oahu. They had a lot of land ownership back in that area, and they were the ones that adopted me. That's why my name became James K. Roberts, and I carried that name through almost half of my life, and I decided to change it back to my original name when I moved back to Hawaii. But anyway, I was a very excuse me, young baby when I was hanai'd out to what so was my adopted mother, and she raised me from the very beginning. I can recollect as a very little young infant that I was also raised on a ranch, and come to find out it was called Kualoa Ranch, and it's a famous ranch now. But in those days, it was a cattle ranch where horses and cattle were raised. And I remember those days, all the cowboys, we call them paniolos, they used to come to the house and eat breakfast in the morning with their big coffee cups and crackers and butter and bacon and eggs, and they would eat there in our house and then go right across to the ranch and go to work. I remember those days as a very young infant, and we lived there for a while, and it was a beautiful area. We lived off the land quite a bit because resources were very abundant at that time, especially from the sea, from the ocean. And as people, ocean people, we ate a lot from the sea. And also, of course, we had the cattle from the ranch. And then just before we moved to another area called Liliha when I was about probably 4 years old, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe in 1937, I guess. We moved, I'm guessing we moved from Kualoa to this area called Liliha, which was pretty closer to town, It was a pretty nice area. It was a small district. There was a lot of different variety of nationalities that lived on that lane, but we were the only Hawaiians on that lane. There were lots of Japanese, there were Chinese, Filipinos, Puerto Ricans, all the different Oriental nationalities. But like I said, we were the only Hawaiians on that lane that lived on that lane. Then, of course, at about the same time we moved there, my younger brother, which I didn't know I had, moved in with us, and come to find out that he was one of my brothers that I didn't know we had. And of course, also that is the time that World War II came into play. But before that, of course, you know, it were kindergarten times, and I went to kindergarten there in that district. Then I went to elementary school until 1941 when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Then, of course, the state became under martial law by the military. I remember that day distinctly because we thought, me, my family, my kids, brothers, and all, we thought they were doing a little maneuvers, because in those days there were a lot of military action going on at that time, and we just didn't pay attention to it. We thought it was just United States doing their maneuvering, etc., etc. Until come to find out, we start hearing all these loud explosions, and then of course my neighbor's house right at the corner, one of the Japanese dropped a bomb on it, blew his house up, and we figured something was wrong. And our parents started yelling at us to get in the house. And one block above our street, where we lived, called Judge Street, there was a family going to church in a car, and the Japanese plane came down and strafed them and killed every one of them. So within that district where I live, called Liliha, there were a lot of action on things that happened there during World War II. And of course, eventually where we lived, the exact street lane that I lived on, that area became a military installation for anti-aircraft, and the Army just took over that whole area, which consisted of maybe 10 square miles or something, quite a bit of land that they could build a anti-aircraft installation. And then, of course, we lived under that law for about 4 years. And we learned a lot I did, of course, as a kid. When you were old enough, you were drafted. Even if you were in high school, you were of age, you were gone. The next day, you were drafted immediately. My uncle, my older brothers, foster brothers, they were gone into the military. So we didn't see them till after the war, but it was hard times. We had to abide by the military and the law, and everything at that time was rationed. Food was rationed, fuel was rationed, milk, everything. The times were hard. I made some extra money by shining shoes, doing some errands for the military people, because they were in a barbed wire enclosure. They couldn't come out. So they'd pass us the notes through the barbed wire, and we'd pick up the notes, get their money, go to the store and get what they want, come back, give it to them, and they would tip us. So that's one way of making money, selling newspapers, polishing shoes, whatever it takes, collecting aluminum from cigarette packs, you're making aluminum balls to sell. We figured ways how to make extra money. In those days also, everything was limited. Toys were limited. Everything went towards the efforts of the war. In fact, in my childhood life, I think I can remember getting a pair of pistols for a toy, and I think the whole family had train set one year. Other than that, we didn't get any toys. There were no toys for Christmas. So what we got for Christmas was things that we needed, like clothes, shorts, t-shirts, stuff like that, undershirts, underpants, things that we need, not things that we want. You know, we can get a lot of things that we want, but we really need the stuff that we need. That's what we got. So nowadays, everybody is spoiled with everything that we have now. But anyway, I'm going to take a little break right now. Okay, we'll just continue on from World War II. Yeah, we tried to make as much or make money as any way that we could. Also, those were the years when, like I said, everything was rationed. We were issued all gas masks. And even the kids, when I was small, I was issued mine when I was 8 years old in I think it was January 1942. You got issued an ID card, and you have to carry that wherever you go. If you don't have it, they'll lock you up in jail. You have your ID card, your gas mask, and shots. And you got to show all that to the MP if they ask you for it. And all your shot records is right there. And I had all that when I was 8 years old. And when I was going to elementary school at that time, it was called Lanakila. And by the way, that's the name of one of my granddaughters. Lanakila means victory in Hawaiian. But I went to that school, and we used to practice a lot of air raid bomb shelter practices. We'd run out of the classroom and go into all the bomb shelters that were made on the school ground, and we'd sit in the bomb shelters, you know, till the practice was over. Then we'd go back into the school. So it was, everything was kind of regimented for us. We were told, kind of told what to do. You had to under those circumstances. Every night there was a curfew. You couldn't be out on the street. I think it was after, I'm not sure, but I think it was after 10 o'clock. We had to paint all of our windows, doors, everything had to be painted black. If the MPs or something saw any light, they'd shoot your lights out. Literally. But so everything had to be painted. In our area, when they would practice practicing their anti-aircraft firing, they had to let us know because it would shake all the houses and all the dishes would fall off and fall on the floor and break. So they'd come and tell us we're going to practice, so we'd either tape it or tape the doors or something to keep it from falling. So we lived under those circumstances for about 4 years. That was hardship, but everything was cheap. The movies those days were like 9 cents. Everything was very, of course, reasonable because nobody had money. And in our neighborhood, we didn't know we were all poor because we were all the same. Everybody was poor, but we didn't know it. That's the one good thing about it. Nobody harassed anybody. Nobody talked down to anybody. Everybody was the same. We helped each other. Everybody helped each other. Nobody mentioned about, oh, you're a poor guy, or I'm a poor guy, you're a poor guy. Nobody mentioned anything about that. We just lived from day to day and went on with our lives. And of course, it was a very hard time in Hawaii because of the many people that we lost in World War II also. And all the Japanese that were drafted, and also those who were put in intern camps. That were supposedly spies, but they weren't. It was just because they were Japanese they were put in camps. And then finally World War II was over, and then we moved to another area called Kapahulu. And we moved there, I think it was 1945, right after the war. World War II ended, I believe it was September 1945. And right after that we moved to Kapahulu. I was new in that district, new in that area. First day on the job at Pineapple Fields, I was working for the pineapple company at that time as a pineapple picker. You'll hear that slang, a pineapple picker, while I was working. We'd work in the hot sun for 50 cents an hour and $4 a day. I don't think you can get anybody to do that anymore. But anyway, the first day at work, lunchtime, I'm eating my lunch and I'm finished. I'm swinging on a branch on a tree, just relaxing, and it falls down. I fell on this guy and told him I was sorry and all that. He didn't buy it. He wanted to fight. I said, I'm sorry about it. So I didn't want to fight, because I was new in that area. He wanted to fight. I said, okay, I'll take you up. And so instead of that, he called about 3 or 4 other guys, and they all worked me over. But that's all right. So I rode home in the cab of the truck. When I got home, my cousin Newton, we call him Nose, because he had a nose. But we didn't know. I didn't know anyway, because I was new. He was a judo champ of the island, and his brother was a boxing champ of the island, which I didn't know. So when I came home, my cousin looked at me and said, "What happened?" I was all bruised up. So I told him what happened. He said, "Okay, come with me next day." So he was like the bull of the school. That was high school. The high school and the intermediate went to school together. The intermediate went in the morning because there was only one school there in that area. The intermediate went in the morning. The high school went in the afternoon. So he was in high school. He come in the afternoon. So we told me, "Come here." So he had all those guys come to one of the bathrooms. And they didn't know that he was my cousin. And when they heard that, boy, they were begging for mercy. And of course, my cousin didn't hit him. Right? He said, "Look, you guys ever touch my cousin again, we'll break all your arms." But, he was a judo champ. So, you can do it very easily in judo. And they said they'll promise to never do it again. And I had a pretty good life after that, because everybody knew I was Nose's cousin. So after that, I was pretty good. And of course, I went to high school, learned how to drive a truck with no license. The truck had no brakes. It was, we call it a banana wagon, which was a station wagon at those days. And we'd drive it around the school ground. And the handbrake was the brakes. And I learned how to drive with that. In fact, when I went down to take my driver's license, nobody taught me how to drive. I taught myself how to drive. And when I did go down to get my driver's license, I got it. Passed the driver's test, everything. But I learned that. Learned how to drive by myself. And of course, Kaimaki was known to be a gambling school. I ran all the gambling that gone on in that school. That's how I got the name Ace. For some of you that don't know it. Anyway, we'll take another break. Thanks. Okay. I was still in high school, and in 1947, I think I was 12 or something. I think that's the first indication of any type of martial arts that I might be interested in. They had a boxing club in Kaimuki Park. It was in somebody's basement. So I went down there and did a little bit of that boxing. I didn't like it too much when I got popped in the head by the coach. And then I tried judo with the famous Henry Okazaki. He's a real famous judo instructor in the islands. Everybody well known under him. Henry Okazaki. That was all in 47. And I think I was 43. I was 14. Yeah. That's when my first interest. But then I wasn't really interested then after that in the martial arts or any type of self-defense. So going back to high school again. Then 1950 came around, and of course the Korean War broke out. Nobody heard of Korea in 1950, but we heard about it because some of our high school students the year before already got killed over there in Korea. And this was in June, and the war started in June. June 25th is when the war started. And by the time we came back to the islands, that the Korean War, etc., people from our school were already killed. So there was a bunch of us that said, "Oh, let's volunteer and we go over there and we're going to kill all them guys over there. Because we're, gung-ho. We were 17, 18, 19, nothing can happen to us. So we all joined. I finished my 11th grade. I graduated from 11th grade, so at least I did that. And there was 47 of us that all volunteered to go to take our basic and all go to Korea. We were known as the first All Hawaii platoon of volunteers for the Korean War. And that was our title. After that, everybody came after us with secondary. But we were the first All Hawaii platoon. And when we arrived at Schofield, first of all, we took the test at Ala Moana. And I scored the highest in what was called Morse code. They don't do that now. They don't do Morse code now. But anyway, I had the highest test in Morse code. So the instructor asked me if he can save me from going to Korea because he can send me to Fort Meredith, New Jersey, and go to the Signal Corps school, and I wouldn't have to go to Korea. He said, "What do you want to do?" I said, No, I want to stay with my buddies." He said, "Are you stupid? You're going to go to Korea?" I said, "Yeah, I want to stay with my buddies." So I stayed with them, and we took all infantry basic, all strictly infantry, no advance, no AIT, no nothing, strictly infantry. Then we took our leave, 30-day leave, went home, said all goodbyes, and then we were on our way to Korea. And I think I'll pick up next, the next interview of Carry On. Okay. Before we begin another segment, I would like to give an apology to Bill Odom and Albino De Silva, because earlier when we started our first segment, I forgot to mention Bill Odom and Albino because I forgot to put them on my list. When you get older, sometimes you forget some things. So those two were also under the umbrella of the Roberts karate tree. And Bill Odom is down at Norfolk, Virginia, and Albino is up at DeCosta, Maryland. I want to go back to some more again of my childhood, because there were a lot of things I missed talking about at my childhood days. When I grew up, for one thing, we never went to the doctor. I never went to the doctor. My mother always treated us with the Hawaiian medicines from the forest and from the woods. She used herbs. I had the typical measles, mumps, chicken pox, and those things, and everything was taken care of at home. So I just want to emphasize the fact that while growing up, I never did go to the hospital. I went to the hospital, really, but I'll take that back. I went to the hospital twice before I went into the Army. Once, I was playing football when I was in the kindergarten, and I was running with the ball. The guy tackled me from the back, and my face hit this big chunk of rock that was embedded in the ground. And my mouth and everything hit the rock and tore my whole mouth up. I ended up of course, going to the dentist. That was one of the times that I ended up in the hospital. And then the second time is I was probably, maybe 8 or 9. I forgot how old I was. I was climbing this mango tree in our yard. We had a huge mango tree. It was about as tall as a telephone pole. And there was a nice yellow ones up top. So I started climbing the tree. And I was squatting on a branch and reaching out for this nice yellow mango. And the next thing I remember is the branch I was squatting on broke. And the last thing I remember is falling backwards. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. And those were the only 2 times I ended up going to the hospital when I was a kid. And the next time I remember going to the hospital is when I joined the Army, went for my physical. I just wanted to emphasize the fact that we took care of all of our sicknesses at home. My mom took care of that. In Hawaii, we call that la'au. It's a person who knows how to use the herbs from the woods, and she was a master at that. Also, while growing up, there was a time, I remember talking about Christmas. I remember there was a time one year, we were so poor at one time that we had to make our own Christmas tree. And there was another tree in our yard. It was, I don't know what kind of tree it was. It had branches and it had a lot of leaves. And all the leaves were little leaves, not real little, but maybe about the size of a quarter. But they were all different colors, red, maroon, orange, and it looked very colorful. So that year we didn't have any money for the family to buy a Christmas tree. So my mom told me to, climb the tree and start cutting off these branches. And I'd cut off these branches, and what she'd do is take a twine and wire it together and make it to look like a Christmas tree, and it was very beautiful. We didn't even need any lights, but we did put lights on it because we did have a string of lights. And we put it on that made-up Christmas tree, and it looked really good. And that was another thing I forgot to mention. When I was a kid growing up in the neighborhood, we were so poor that time that we couldn't afford a tree, so we had to make one. You just do it the best you can. Also, there was between kindergarten and elementary school, I learned a lot. During those years of the war, all the men were gone, so a lot of the kids, or everybody had to chip in and to do whatever we need to do. But during those years, I learned how to cook, I learned how to wash clothes, I learned how to starch, I learned how to iron, I learned how to make poi out of taro, I learned how to sew. We learned everything. I learned everything that a young boy could learn, and that helped me as an adult also. When you look back, you say, "Wow, a kid that knows all of." Well, we had to. In those years, we had to, so that we can help everybody, support the whole family, because the men were gone. In fact, on our back porch, we had a huge. What we call papakuiai is a platform where we pound the poi, which is called pa'iai, where we made our own poi out of taro. And I learned how to do that as a kid, as a youngster. So by the time I graduated from elementary school, I was a young man, but I still was a young boy. And I learned all of that. And plus the war was going on. Also, I remember mentioning to you that I had an ID card that I had to carry around. Well, I went back and I found it. And this is the front portion of it. This is where your name and address is printed up front. And in the back here is where your fingerprints are printed, and the dates that you issued your gas mask, and the date you were given your shots. And on this, I was issued my mask on March 31st, 1942. That's when they issued me my gas mask. And those gas masks, we had to carry it wherever we went. And anyway, but this is the ID card that we have. That's a pretty important document. And I don't know how, and heck, I still have that thing. That was given to me in 1942 when I was, I think, 8 years old, and I still have it. In fact, I learned how to iron so good that even now I still iron my dress shirts for me, my white dress shirts, and even Terry at times tell me if she needs anything, her blouses to iron, I would iron her blouses for her. I still do that as of now. Okay, back to going to the Korean War. We were all replacements, and they wanted us there as quickly as possible. So all of us went over on flights. We flew over. We didn't go on a ship or anything. They wanted us there quick, so we all split up in different number of groups, number-wise, and flew over to Japan. Sometimes there were 10, sometimes there were 3. I think on mine, I was the only one, and the type of plane I was on was a C-47 cargo plane. It had a twin engine. I was kind of leery of that thing flying all the way across the Pacific Ocean. But anyway, this is a picture of myself, and as you can see, I have my rifle with me. In those days, we carried our rifle with us. Whenever we left the post, we checked it in at the base. But you carried your rifle with you right on the plane and everything. And that's my uniform. That's what I went to Korea with. By the way, that all of our training here is all with summer clothes. So that was supposedly to be my winter clothes. And as you can see, that's not really that. As you can see, it's not that warm. It would keep me warm there while I'm in Korea. But anyway, boarded the plane. I said goodbye to my girlfriend and all that. Left, and we had to make a couple of stops. I think Johnson Island was one, and I believe Wake was the other one before we landed in Japan. This cargo plane was a C-47, and when we took our approach on Johnson Island, Johnson Island is a pretty narrow island. We kind of almost missed it. We had to take another run at it before we could land. And when we landed, all we had to do was refuel and just kept going. And then finally we ended up in Japan, boarded trucks, and headed for Camp Drake, where the 1st Cav Division was headquartered at before they left to go to Korea. So that Camp Drake was kind of like a replacement post, where all the replacements came in. From there, you went to Korea, or vice versa. You come there and go back to the mainland. So we met up again with all the local guys until we all got there, and then we all were on our way to Korea again, getting on a plane and flying over to I think it was Kimpo Air Base. I'm not sure, but they wanted us there fast because of there was a big push heading north, and we had the enemy on the run, I guess. Anyway, we landed at Kimpo, which is somewhere near Seoul, and they took us to this big train station, and there were these huge cattle cars, where they're all cattle, and it smelled like they had cattle in there too, and they just piled us in there like cattle, and we were piled up, and when the cattle car was full, they put another one in there, and then we'd load up the train, and that train was heading north to North Korea. On our way up to North Korea, all of a sudden the train stopped and we were in a tunnel. And the guys who were in the cattle car that was stuck in the tunnel, we thought we were ambushed already because we didn't know what was going on. But come to find out, there was something that stopped the train from moving forward. And then later on, it kept on going. I don't know how long it took us to get to North Korea. I think we got to Pyongyang, which is the northern capital of Korea. And then again, there was another breakdown of troops, and then the units from that were fighting up there came to this replacement company to pick up replacements. So this squad leader came down the line, and there were 10 of us from Hawaii that was chosen to go to this recon company. So we were called to go to the 25th Division, 25th Infantry Recon Company. So here comes the squad leader. He was a rifle squad leader. walking down the line, choosing the people he wants, and then all of a sudden he points in my direction and he says, "You're going to be my machine gunner." And I thought he was pointing next to the guy next to me, which was a big howler guy. He would be a nice machine gunner. And the guy, and my squadron said, "No, you." And they pointed at me and said, "I'm going to be a gunner." I said, "Yep." So I know I'm going to die now, because machine gunners don't last long in combat. That's the first person to go after the machine guns. So the reason that we lost the machine gunner before me. So I said, "Oh my God." So anyway, that was the start of our company. I was assigned to 1st Platoon, Rifle Squad, 25th Recon Company, and we headed up further north, heading towards the Yellow River. And I think we got pretty close to the Yellow River, and we buckled down and set up a defensive line and all that, and started digging in and just getting prepared. And then all of us, then we had our Thanksgiving dinner. I remember that, having Thanksgiving dinner, and I think a week after that is when all hell broke loose, and that's when the Chinese National Army from China entered the war. And we didn't know that about 300,000 to 400,000 infiltrated into North Korea, and nobody even noticed them until they were there. And once they started their attack, there was no stopping them. They just came and they overpowered everybody. They overran everybody. In fact, we were kind of in an outpost blocking position, and they just ran right by us. They didn't care about us. They wanted the main line. We were kind of like an isolated platoon. They wanted the big guys. They wanted the front line, and we were we were in the front of the front line. The recon company's job is go find the enemy, and that's what their job is. So we're usually, being a reconnaissance company, we're 5 to 10 miles maybe, sometimes in the main front line. And our job is, like I said, is to locate the enemy. Well, we had to fight our way back to get back to our own front lines, but that was the beginning. That was the beginning of the end for us, as far as the Chinese attack was. And it didn't take them long to push that whole 8th Army line down to the Han River, north of the Han River. Then when the 8th Army got to the Han River, we were designated as blocking for the whole 8th Army to cross the Han River. And of course, we were on one side of the bridge of the Han River, and we had another platoon on the other side of the bridge. Not on the south side of the Han River, still on the north side, but on the other side of the bridge. You see, in a blocking position too. So I was up in a chapel, steeple, looking with my binoculars, and as soon as I saw the enemy, was to let our people know. And I saw them from far out coming. I said, "They're coming." So once we started blocking for getting everybody finally getting across the Han River, the platoon on our left, which was on the other side of the Han River, they got cut off, and they couldn't make it back. So that was a 33-man platoon right there that was gone. So we made it we were the last people to cross the Han River, and then they blew the Han River up. We moved back south to some place, I think it was called Suwon, I think. Yeah, Suwon. Then I'll pick it up later after that. Okay, I'm going to go back to talking about, I forgot to talk about how cold it was there in Korea. And as you can see, all the people who left from Hawaii, all we had was summer clothes. We didn't have no winter clothes. So we all went over with khakis. Nobody knew what a winter sleeping bag was. Nobody knew what any type of winter clothing was. We didn't have any. So it was really cold. In fact, they were saying that was the coldest war that America has ever been involved in. We left Hawaii, it was 80 degrees. When we got to Korea, it was between 50 and 60 below zero. Now the temperature when we got there was around 30, 35 below zero, but then the wind chill factor from Manchuria brought the temperature down to 50, 60. And everything froze, the weapons, everything. Food, ammo, my weapon frozen. I mean, sometimes you had to do what you need to make it work. So it was a very cold and miserable winter. The Korean winter is brutal, especially in North Korea because of the Manchuria, the way the peninsula is made up. You know, that wind just comes right through the north, and the north comes right through the northern plain in North Korea, and the wind is what kills you. And if you fall asleep, accidentally fall asleep, you're not going to get up. You're going to die. And there were, I think I remember distinctly 2 times that almost happened to me. And it's funny, there's something that wakes you up, and that it wakes you up. And if you don't get up past that time frame there, you're gone. All your body is gone. So, but when you do wake up, it's just like being in a freezer. Just like waking up in a freezer. It's so cold. And you know, us being no winter clothes, I mean, we had to scrounge everything we had to try to keep us warm. And I had my regular Army combat boots that I had from Hawaii. I didn't have no snowpacks, no Mickey Mouse boots, no nothing, because we didn't have it. But you know, the human body, the human mind, the human will to live is pretty great too. That's what drives you on, the will to live. As far as that winter, Christmas, I remember Christmas Eve, I was called down off the mountain to go to the command post and report, and I reported down there and just told me that you got promoted to PFC, so it was a big deal, private first class, so I'll now go back up on the hill. Anyway, Christmas, we were fighting already. I kind of lost that Christmas. But you know, throughout my whole military career, I've had 5 hardship tours. In other words, 5 tours that you can't take your family with you. So you can look, just doing that, you can say, well, I missed 5 Christmases away from home. So I've been away from home a lot. People didn't realize that. But it was a very miserable winter, the 50 winter. And it was so cold that I remember we captured a couple of prisoners, but they were in a foxhole, and when we tried to pull them out, they couldn't come out because both of them didn't have feet. It was gone. They both had frostbite, and they wanted us to take them with us, but we couldn't do it. We were on the move, and they would slow us down. So all I could do to help them a little bit was to take some gasoline from one of our tanks and just pour it on their feet, on their legs, to just kill the gangrene, kill the maggots that were all over their legs and all that. So I hated to leave them, but hopefully somebody else behind us could have picked them up. And by the way, I was 17 years old. It's a lot of things that a 17-year-old has to go through. But you know, I volunteered for it. I didn't know what to expect, and sometimes we overload what we really shouldn't do, but we did. And when you do, you just got to do the best you can to survive. But I didn't know it was going to be that bad. And I also, there's another thing that earlier in 1949, I joined the National Guard. I lied to them, went to the National Guard. We had an armory downtown Honolulu. I went downstairs, told the guy I wanted to sign up. He said, how old are you? I said, 17. He said, come on, sign this paper and all that. So I was 16. So I was 16 when I joined the National Guard, and when the Korean War broke out, I was 17. I made 17 in May. The Korean War broke out in June. I joined the Army in July. So thanks for that type of life. But anyway, I enjoyed what I did with the military. So I'll just stop for now and take a break and come back later. Thanks. Remember what I mentioned earlier in my segment that I was chosen to be the machine gunner, and the guy next to me was a Howley guy. I just found this picture, and I was 17 years old. And as you can see, my buddy was the ammo barrel, and his name was Boyd. So, and you can see that I don't have too much winter clothes on, but it was pretty cold. Anyway, we just found that picture. Okay, we'll pick up from after we blew up the Han River Bridge, but these next stories will be about things that happened that I forgot to mention. But it was during the Chinese big push to overtake the 8th Army. Of course, they were still pushing us down south. But anyway, we were in a blocking position at one time during the Chinese push on their offense. And we had to make sure that they couldn't make it to one of the paths. A pass is where maybe two mountains come to where the roads go through it, and then we had to hold that position to stop them from coming through that. But before that, we had to go through the pass, and we had laid down anti-tank mines. The anti-tank mines were to stop the Russian T-34 tanks. So after mining the roads at the pass, I decided to booby trap one of the mines. And what I did was booby trap anti-tank mine with a pressure release booby trap under the anti-tank, one of the anti-tank mines. And I didn't camouflage it as good as it should be. I wanted to make sure that someone can see it, would identify it quite easily. After doing all this, after prepping and all that, setting all the mines, then we pulled back to another hill way back to the rear, and we stayed there and observed the pass for quite a few hours. And then we heard the enemy coming, the tanks, and of course we could hear it. And then all of a sudden, I hear a loud explosion. And of course, I was thinking that they found the mine that I booby trapped. So we waited a while, and we did what we had to do because it distracted them and pulled them out of that pass and made them go another way. And that's what we wanted to do. So when everything was clear, I went down to the pass and looked at the explosion of the mine that I booby trapped, and it sure was the one. And when I looked at the site, the only thing that was left was the soldier who was digging for that mine. The only thing that was left of him was his shoe. Both shoes were there. And of course, you know, the Chinese were wearing the down shoes, which is feathers to keep them warm. And they just blew him right out of the shoes. And the shoes were there smoldering. And I kind of, well, that's the end of that person anyway. And then another one that was kind of funny also is we were going up this hill, and this concerns mines again, any personnel mines. These mines are used to hurt any personnel, therefore it doesn't take much pressure to set these things off. So we were going up this hill and we found that the Chinese mined the hill also. So we have a system of what we call coning the mines. And we have cones with us, they look like ice cream cones. And when you find a mine, you cone it so that nobody would go near it. Well, we had this Canuck. Well, he was a Canadian soldier, and he lost his tank because it got blown up. So he came with us, the rifle squad, and he wanted to come and just be with us. He had no other place to go. So he was coming up the hill with us, and all of a sudden, I heard this loud explosion. Well, it wasn't really that loud. It was loud enough when I looked back, this Canuck was on the ground and his right foot was gone. The anti-personnel mine blew his right foot completely right off. And I asked him, did you step on the mine accidentally or what happened? He said, I didn't think you had a mine under there and I kicked it. So we kind of called him stupid. You know, we kind of got upset at him. And then he finally said, at least I'm beating your pineapples home. Now that was kind of a dumb statement, but if that's what he wanted, he got it. And then at one time, there's another time too, where during the war, there were a lot of people who volunteered for the war that were 15 or 16 years old. And in our rifle squad, we had this big 16-year-old boy. I mean, he was big, but when you look at him, you know, he looked like a man. But you can tell by his face that it was a young boy. So he was only 16 years old. So we kind of tried to encourage him to get out of the service. We'll turn his name into the command post, and so he can go home. Right then, as soon as you were 15 or 16, you were gone. Well, he said, no, he'll stay there until he reaches 17. Well, it happened. One day before you got 17, you got killed. So that kind of was a sad part of that story, because he could have went home. I'd like to say something before we start again. The governor finally let us out of our homes. So I've been going to the beach lately, and it feels so great to get in the water again, get out in the sun and enjoy the sun. And as you can see, I got just a little darker, but not too much. But I got my hair cut. You know, the barber's open now. I can get my hair cut. So I kind of look like I'm back in the service again. I'm back teaching karate and everything. But anyway, all right, the next thing I want to talk about is the first time I took a shower. I don't know how long or it was before we had a chance to take a shower. You know, we got there during the winter, so I'm guessing that probably didn't take a shower for at least 2-3 months. And then when we finally got to go to a reserve where we could rest a while, and then we had this quartermaster shower tent set up where we can go and take a shower. The only problem with that shower was that you only have 2 minutes. You got to turn the shower on, 2 minutes the shower is off. Well, anyway, I didn't realize when I started taking my clothes off that when I finally got down to my underwear and my long john underwear, that I had this white lice all over me on the inside where your armpits, where there's hair, you know, in your crotch. These white lice were living there, and I didn't even know about it. So I had to really realize what was happening. So I really had to take a good shower and all that, get all that off of me. And then when the 2 minutes is up, you go outside. Everybody's in there. Everybody's naked. Nobody cares about what. And then once you're finished taking a shower, you run out and they shoot you with DDT or whatever that chemical they use. Then you go to another line and pick up whatever clothes they give you. Usually it's oversized. And then you're off to your company with a clean set of clothes. So that was the first time I took a shower for I don't know how many months. And it felt so good. It felt good to get rid of that lice. And by the way, I remember mentioning at the very beginning that everybody went to Korea and we all got to be riflemen, but it's not true. There was one of us that was selected to go to the GRS. GRS means Grave Registration Service. So I forgot his name. He was a Filipino guy though, but his job was to go and pick up all the dead bodies. He had a terrible job. And we saw him about 5-6 months later. He looked like he looked like he could go to a madhouse or something. But in those days, you know, we didn't have body bags, so all he had to, what he was doing is just picking up the bodies and just tossing it in a truck like a sack of potatoes. You know, because when everything is frozen, there's nothing you can do. The body is preserved, but you can't put it in a body bag. And you just toss it, like I said, a piece of meat right into the truck, load it up, take it to the grave registration, unload it, go back up to the lines, pick up some. And I haven't seen him since then, but I hope everything is all right with him mentally, anyway. I think I'll stop for a while now, and then maybe I'll pick it up another time later. Okay, thanks. For this segment, I'm going to be talking about myself, not about the military. We can pick that up later on. But I left Virginia in 2002. Came back home. Bought a house on Hawaiian homelands. And in order to buy a home on Hawaii homelands, you have to be a native Hawaiian. And a native Hawaiian is like an indigenous person. You have to have at least 50% of your native had to be a Hawaiian native blood. So you have to qualify to get on these homesteads. But anyway, I'm enjoying my life here. It's pretty close to the beach. Since I've been home, I learned how to stand up paddle, of course. I can't go back to regular surfing because I injured my neck in the military. So I can't hold my neck up like you do in surfing, regular surfing. So when I came home, I saw these people standing up and paddling. So I got involved in learning that. You know, I learned it like everybody else. I was a beginner. I fell 1,000 times, but like the old Chinese say, you got to get back up again for the 8th round. So I kept falling and getting up, kept falling, getting up. Pretty soon I got to a point where I can stand up paddle. And then I saw people surfing. So my next challenge was to learn how to surf again with the paddle. So I started learning how to stand up surf paddle. And of course I fell 1,000 times. But now I've learned how to stand up surf, and I'm well known on this military beach as the old man. You know, I'm 87 years old, and there's not too many people out there on a surfboard at my age. They're usually in there. The oldest guy, one time I met a guy, I thought he was old because he looked old, and he was wearing a malo, but he was a guy from the mainland, and he looked really old. So I thought, wow, I got to see how old this guy is, because he's got to be older than I am. Come to find out, he was way younger than I was. So I just left it as that. But anyway, I enjoyed myself surfing, getting back in the sun. But you know, I do miss the people in Virginia. I do miss teaching karate. I know I'm not teaching it now, but you know, I don't feel like I want to get back to it. I just miss teaching back in Virginia. I miss all the students. But I'm enjoying my life. The reason I'm wearing these glasses is that my left eye is totally blind. I had glaucoma through my fault. No fault of anybody else but mine. I didn't catch it fast enough to go to the doctor. So now I'm officially blind. Last year I had, as you can see, I've lost a lot of weight. I lost at least 25 pounds. I had a kidney stone they found it was about 6 centimeters, and then plus I had pneumonia in my system. I didn't even know about it. When I went to the doctor was asking me how come I didn't feel all the pain that goes with kidney stones and all these things. I said I thought it was a stomach ache. So by the time they found it, they did an MRI on a Thursday and did the surgery on a Saturday real quick to get that stone out of there. And when they got the stone out and they finally cleared where I can use the bathroom, let me tell you something, guys. That's the most painful thing I've ever did. You better believe the women, man. When they say it's painful to give birth, this thing is about the same thing. And finally, my system is back in it good again. I'm starting to gain weight, get some of my weight back. As you can see now, the governor let us back to the beaches, so I'm back out again. And once I get my strength back, I'll be back in the water with my surfboard and enjoying the rest of my life I have here in Hawaii. Okay. Everything's fine. I'm doing good. Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning. Nice day in Hawaii. I'm going to resume what we were talking about, my life, throughout my life. Anyway, I'd like to talk about the members that we took basic together. I guess, you know, every one of us went over to Korea, and within the first 2 to 3 months, within our group, 5 of them were killed in action, 9 were wounded, 1 was a POW, and 1 became a MIA, KIA. So that's probably almost a third of the people that went over together with us that were casualties at the first 2 or 3 months. But eventually, I don't know how many ended up, eventually getting killed in action because, I left there after my year. So, but anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. I also want to talk about this person. I'm not going to mention his name, but it's a very important thing to bring up. As you karate people know, that on my wall at the Springfield studio, we have some words on the wall, tenets about the martial arts that I put up. And one of the words up on the wall was to persevere. And we had this one person in our basic training that always had problems persevering. He would always kind of give up just before the end. And during basic, whenever there is a problem within the platoon, everybody suffers. So what we try to do is make sure that no one got in trouble, even if we have to help them out. So this guy, when we used to go on those full field marches, with all our pack and equipment, we'd go from Schofield to Haleiwa, forced marches, and he would drop back and he can't make it. He would complain and et cetera, et cetera. So some of us would have to go back, carry his load, carry his rifle, and drag him along so that we would complete our full field march. If we didn't, then we would be, at the end of the march, we would be in for trouble. So this guy did that throughout the whole basic training. He just barely graduated from basic, but we kept telling him that if he doesn't get his act together when he gets to Korea, he's going to get captured. So when we got to Korea, him and my other buddy, I can give his name because he's still alive, Billy Cow, were with the 5th Regimental Combat Team. And this, I don't know when it was still during the winter. Remember, we got there in November. So both of them were sent out on an LP. LP is a listening post where you go about 100, maybe 200 meters in the front of the front line just to listen and look and see if you can locate any enemy activity or any movement. Then you report back to the front line what's going on. So as soon as they got to their position, they got a call from their company, their platoon, informing them that to get out of there right away, the Chinese were attacking. So Billy Cow unhooked the radio and started, and the order was, you're on your own. So he unhooked and started heading back towards the front line, and everybody was on their own, him and the other guy. So he kept moving back towards the front line, not paying attention to his rear, thinking that the other guy was right behind him. Eventually, when they got to their own friendly front lines, one of the guys asked him, "Where is this other guy?" Like I said, I'm not going to mention his name. Oh, see, I thought he was right behind me, but he wasn't. So from that day forward, we assumed that he was a MIA. So we registered him as a MIA as of November 1950. And what is so funny, through all those years, what's 40, 50 years, we classified him as a MIA throughout all those years. Anyway, I lived in Virginia. So in July 27th, 1995, they dedicated the Korean War Memorial, and all the Korean veterans were invited to attend. And I was there and attended the ceremony. And after the ceremony, there were 3 large squad tents that were set up on the mall. And one was for all the information on POWs, and then another one was on information on all killed in action, KIAs. And then there was another tent for the MIAs, missing in action. As you know, during the Korean War, there was 8,100 MIAs, for some of you that didn't know about it. At the end of the war, there was still over 8,000 missing in action. But anyway, I went to the MIA tent, and the sergeant helped me, and he said, you know, I can't find anything with this guy's name on it. So I said, I'm sure he was there. You know, he was missing in December of 1950. He said, well, you know, I'm sorry, I looked all the way back. So he told me, why don't you go to the KIA and see his name might be on that list. So the KIA tent was right next, so I went there, and sure enough, he was killed in action. He died January of 51. But anyway, all those years, we thought he was a MIA. So when I came back to Hawaii in 2002, right away, the military had me check in at the hospital for a physical, for psychological checkup, physical checkup and everything. And I ended up seeing a doctor down at downtown Honolulu for psychologists. Anyway, I had to see this guy, PTSD. At that time it was combat fatigue. Something is what they called it. Anyway, it was what is known now as PTSD. So he was my counselor. So I was with him for about 4 months. When I came home, I found out there were a lot of things wrong with me physically that I didn't know. I didn't really pay attention to it. You know, it ended up I had a high percentage of PTSD. I lost 30% of my hearing. I had tinnitus in my ears. I had a cold weather injury on my foot from the Korean year 1950. So there were a lot of things that were wrong with me that I didn't normally pay attention, because all I thought about was going to work and teaching karate. But anyway, so this counselor told me to see if I can set up an appointment to go to the VA up at Tripler, because there was a group up there of Korean veterans and World War II mixed together. And he said, you might know some people up there that's in the group. And you know me, I didn't want to go, typical stubborn. Then finally I said, okay, I'll go. He said, you might know some people in there. So I said, I got set up for an appointment for counseling for the group. And sure enough, I walked in and I knew about 4 of them right away. And one of them was this guy, Billy Cow. But you know, after 40, 50 years, you don't recognize, I haven't seen this guy since 1950, and this was 2004. So you know, you changed in 54 years. So I barely recognized, but it was him, because you know, he gained weight, and you know, I changed and everything too. You know, basically I was a slim 140. So, but I asked him, I said, you know, are you Billy Cow? He said, yeah. And then he asked me, he said, you Roberts? I said, yeah. And then we started hugging and feeling close together because of what we went through and all of this. And then it's so funny. That day we all, you know, said a story about what happened, and then he talked about this going out on the LP in front of his company with this guy. And when he came back to the front lines, he didn't know what happened to his buddy that was with him. And I said, "You're not serious, right?" Well, I know the name, but I'm not going to mention it. I told him, "Well, you know what?" I said, your friend got captured in December. He went to a prison camp. He was captured in December, and he went to a POW camp in North Korea in January, and he died there at the I was going to say rest camp, and he died at the POW camp. And Billy was, that was the closure for him because he didn't know what happened to his friend. But we told him, you got to give everything you got when you're training, because your training will transform when you're there. I believe, more sweat on a training field, less blood on a battlefield. It's the same thing. You gotta, especially if you know you're going to go to combat. It's your life is involved in this. You can't afford to be lax in things that you do, because like NFL players, I tell them, because of their flag situation, that you can lose a game and still play. In the military, if you lose the game, you can't play again. That's the end of you. So you've got to persevere, and he didn't, and that cost him his life. So that was the end closure for my friend Billy. And of course, that group started off as a huge group, and then now we're dwindled down to there's only about 4 of us left now. But anyway, I wanted to bring that story in because it's very important when you're teaching, especially in karate and the martial arts, that you got to persevere. Even if you don't make your white belt, you don't make your yellow belt, you keep trying. You get knocked down, you get up. Unless you just don't want to get up, then you're going to lose. If you keep getting up, you'll win. If you keep getting up, you'll win. Even Manny Pacquiao got knocked down, he got up and he won. So you got to learn how to persevere. So just let me stop now for a while. Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm going to give you another short story of something that really happened. It was funny. We're in a rice paddy once. We're going to attack this village, and our squad leader telling us that we can fix bayonets and all that. But when you hear all the bullets flying around, you change your mind real quick. So we waited in the paddy until one of our tanks came up and gave us some support. So once he gave us some support, then then we can move forward because we've got some heavy guns backing us up. So this time then we did have some cover, being the tanks and other support vehicles, machine guns, etc., etc. Then we started to attack the village. Well, the funny part about this is I was trying to hide behind the bullets were flying. I was trying to hide behind a kimchi crock, and that was so crazy because I was thinking the kimchi crock would save me, and one of the bullets hit the kimchi crock, and split it right in two, and that was like a comical event. You should have seen my face when that happened, and I just dove I was just trying to get deeper into, almost dug a foxhole with my body. But that was one of the funny things. But we did take that village, and it was one of the funny things that happened that we can look back and laugh about. Okay. So when I had enough points, in combat, you get so many points while you're in Korea. Well, not only in combat, while you're in Korea, you get so many points. And when you accumulate the points that you need, then you could go home. I had enough points. That night I slept right in front of the command post, so that when they wake up the next morning, they would stumble right over me. And that would make sure that I got up. I got on a jeep, headed for Seoul. Caught the plane and was on my way to Japan. I was so happy. I heard a couple months later, they were in a big, my company was in a big battle and took a lot of casualties. We went from Korea to Camp Drake, Japan, and had a change of clothing, etc. I think we were there a couple of days, but boy, things were really crazy with all these guys just coming off of the front lines. There were a lot of talking going on that night. We went to a club for some beer after a lot of drinking. Remember, we just left the front lines a few days ago, and the spirits was very high, and everybody, and all it took was one spark, and there was a big fight in the club. The spark did light. There was a big fight in the club. The MPs came and locked us all up, and we were locked in a confined area where we couldn't go out until the next morning. Okay, now I'm going to talk about. I just found this picture. I'm going to talk about this picture I have in my hand. It's a picture that we had. Remember, I mentioned in my earlier talk that our company was responsible for the Incheon area in our operation heading north to spring up offensive operation. This is a picture of me and some of my buddies entering Incheon, and we have a sign here that says courtesy from the 25th Recon Company 1st Platoon, and that's us in the picture. And as you can see, Incheon is almost totally destroyed, and that was a city at one time, a very popular city, but now it's down to rubble. And you can see in the background there's no buildings, there's nothing. It's all destroyed. And that's the story about this picture. This other picture I found also is of myself and two of my other buddies. They're from Hawaii, and this is the Chinese flag that we captured once we took this village, and they had the Chinese flag flying, so we tore it down and put up an American flag. So this is what we captured. From left to right, we have Jerry Sam, and of course I'm in the middle. And the other one on the left is Kenny Sheldon. We're three of us took basic together and everything. We all ended up in the same company. I think this is the time that I ended up in the Scouts, because you can see there is a Jeep in the background, and that's one of our Scout Jeeps. And all of us were in the Scouts at that time. And then there's another picture. Remember I told you I ended up in the tanks? Here's a picture of me on the far left, with my head on backwards. I'm a tanker. I think I was 18 years old at that time. But you know, that picture looked like I'm older than 18 years old. And in combat, you know, you get old real quick. You go over as a 17, you come back as a 25-year-old man. But anyway, this is another picture that was taken when I was a tanker, and that was my crew. And as you can see, I'm the youngest guy there. All these guys are old guys. But it was an experience, and of course I lived through it, survived the Korean War, even through the cold and everything. And I was just happy to be part of a nation that stopped the aggression of communism. Okay, thanks. I'm going to talk a little bit about something that happened. It was funny. It's about my buddy. I had a buddy in base camp. His name was Baldo Patterson. Of course, I had a lot of buddies in basic. We're all from Hawaii, so we're all friends. Some closer, some just mid-close, you know. But Baldo was a real nice guy, good guy, and we were all friends. So of course, we all took basic when we went to Korea. We went to all different units. So one day we had a big push. This is when we first got there. I think Baldo went with the 8th Army Rangers, I think, and of course I went with the 25th Recon Company. So we were on a big push heading up north, North Korea, that is. And then we happened to see me on a tank, and I hear this guy goes, "Hey, Robert!" Of course, I turned down. I heard that voice, and I knew who it was. It was Baldo. So I turned down and looked at him, and he told me, "How come you're riding in a tank?" I looked down at him, and since he was walking, I said, "You know what? All smart guys ride, and all dumb guys walk." And he got mad at me and started grumbling and all that. But then when you think about it, if you're riding, you're going to get there before them. So maybe we got the worst end of the deal. But anyway, eventually, of course, Baldo and I, we made it through the war. And then, of course, I came home. We were in separate ways. At that time, of course, when we first knew each other and all that, we were not married. We were all single. And when we got to meet each other again, then we were all old. We all had kids, and they were all grandkids and everything. Then I had a daughter, Kelly, and he had a son, Jason. And lo and behold, what goes around comes around. My daughter and his son got married. So I went up to Baldo. I said, "Oh my God, Baldo, how did this happen?" I was just kidding, of course. But we ended up now a family. So that was one funny story that happened. There are many stories, really, if only I can remember them. Since when you get older, your memory kind of leaves you a little bit, but I just remembered that one. And it was a funny story. It was a happy story. Because now, we have 3 more grandkids, so it's a good ending, and it's a future, because now we have another generation of my family, to live on. So that was fun. But maybe I'll find in my memory bank. Maybe I'll find some more things that are interesting, besides the war and all that. There are a lot of interesting things in my life that happened, but I just got to see if I can remember it. Yeah, thanks. Okay, good morning, everyone. Back to the old grind again. I might have to read some of these right from my book here, because my memory isn't that good how it used to be. But anyway, let's get back to where we left off from our other interview. And right now, we'll go back to being in Suwon, south of the Han River. Okay, our offense started in the early spring of 1951. The artillery and the Air Force bombarded Seoul so that the engineers could build those bridges across the Han River so that we can start our assaults heading up north. Remember, we beat back the North Korean army already, and in November the Chinese entered the war. So now we are fighting the Chinese army. See, our company was part of a group to take back Incheon. As we made our assault across the Han River, our section my company anyway, was involved in the part that is responsible for taking the city of Incheon. Of course, the fighting was hard as usual, but we finally entered the city, and Incheon, of course, the city was almost totally destroyed. Remember, that was turned over several times, the same way how the city of Seoul was turned over several times. So if you have several armies turning it over, the town and city will be kind of destroyed. It exchanged hands, of course, twice, once by the Koreans and now by us. We kept pushing north, and in that frame, I became a machine gun in a scout section. and a gunner in the tanks. We are a reconnaissance company, so we had the light tanks. It was made to move fast. So we were no match for the Russian T-34. Whenever we saw one of the T-34s, immediately we would turn tail because the T-34 had a weapon on them that was unbelievable. If it ever was to hit our tanks, our light tank, it would kind of destroy the whole thing. It would just turn that whole thing to a box of a flaming matchbox. So the T-34 was the most deadly tank. That, of course, it was a Russian tank, but it was the Chinese had those tanks. They used to call the tankers a walk-in pillbox or even iron coffins because if you get hit by a T-34, you're gone. You can just wipe you away. Anyway, I was a gunner till the day I left. They tried to offer me another stripe to stay an additional 30 days, and they would make me a buck sergeant and eventually make me into a tank commander. But I told them, no thanks, I would like to leave and go home.